Hello everyone, welcome to Sunya IAS. This is your lecture number 5 of the ongoing series on NCERT history, and we are specifically doing right now modern history. Now, there is a very good news for everyone. If you have continued and have watched on the lectures till now, the most difficult section for modern Indian history has been done. Okay, the lecture number 4, which contains the stories of how the Britishers were able to take over various Indian regional powers, like whether it was Marathas or Carnatic or Bengal or Punjab. Those things have already been done. Okay, there is one specific section, the main revolt of 1857 is still remaining, through which the Mughal rule effectively, officially will also end, but effectively they were anyway not very powerful after 1765. So that section is done. So that's a good news. If you have able to sustain the classes till here, from here onwards, the things will be a bit lighter, and there won't be too much of mugging up to do. There will be a lot of overlapping with the polity section because there will be a lot of laws and regulations. Okay, those things will be there. So that is something good. Okay, so let's begin. Let's begin with the today's lecture, the lecture number 5. The lecture number 5 is basically tribal and peasant revolts. This tribal and peasant revolt, if you are going to refer to the old NCERT, you will not find this chapter anywhere. Okay, as such, directly written. The topics are covered here and there separately, but directly as in single lecture, it's not a chapter-wise manner. It is not available. Although it over the period, as I have told you, that in past decade, UPSC is giving more importance to what happened with the people on the ground. So if we are talking about what really happened with the people on the ground, this chapter becomes more and more important. Okay, so new NCERT, that's what we're going to refer. 8th standard chapter 4 and 12th standard chapter 10. Okay, if you are referring to the new NCERTs, 8th standard is for modern history, so chapter number 4 from there, and 12th standard chapter number 10 is the section you have to refer for this. If you're watching this along with the PDF of the slides, you will be also be getting the PDFs of the specific chapters, so you don't have to go anywhere. You can just read that chapter after doing this. Time will be reduced and understanding will be better after that. Okay, so let's directly proceed. Let's see the tribal and the peasant revolts in India. Now, why the tribals and peasantry were revolting? For those who are totally new, and first of all, understand who are peasantry and who are the tribals. Okay, so tribal, I think so in 5th standard also you get to know, okay, that the people in the most generic sense, the forest people, but that's the crude way and you shouldn't use that, because tribal societies are actually very interesting, very developed in their own sense of the word developed. Surely they don't have the material gains which the Western society and subsequently our society in which we live actually have gained over that period of past 300-400 years, but they have their advantages also. So in no sense, no way you should think that tribals are somewhere, somehow underdeveloped. But in the modern sense of the word development, they don't have certain things, okay, and to make sure that they have better health facility, better connectivity, there are certain things which needs to be done. But basic idea, tribals are the people who are not that much connected, who live in the forest area and are dependent mostly on forest produce in the sense, not they are not only bounded to agriculture. Okay, they are mostly dependent on forest produce. In the past 100 years, even the tribals have started doing certain kind of agriculture, but from the ancient times, tribals are someone who totally were dependent on the forest. Okay, we'll be talking about, I'll be giving you basic idea where in over the Indian subcontinent, tribal people have been found over throughout the subcontinent. It's not like you will say only in the Chhattisgarh and the Jharkhand region you find the tribal people. No, tribals have been found in Rajasthan. Okay, if you are talking about subcontinent, tribals have also been found in Balochistan. Okay, there are tribal people in the Nilgiri hills in Tamil Nadu. Okay, so tribals are found everywhere. Similarly, we are not only talking about tribals, but we are also talking about peasants. Now, Peasants are the people who are not dependent totally on the forest produce directly, natural forest produce. They are very much involved in land settlements, they are involved in agriculture practice, they do their agriculture and all those things, but they are on the bottommost strata of the society, economically speaking. So basically, when we are uh, clubbing the section of tribals and peasants and how they acted when the British administration took over their region where they used to live. Okay, so basically what we are going to talk about is actually a class divide. Okay, a class divide. Okay, whether someone it accepts it or not, but this is actually a whole issue of class divide. Okay, and by the end of this section you will be able to understand what I'm trying to say by saying class divide. So tribal and peasants, let's move back and let's begin, and let me tell you what we are going to read specifically in this chapter. This is not a very big chapter, this is not going to be on the lines of chapter number 4. Okay, so but still, for in the tribal section we have to finish off what are the basic characters of tribal societies in India. This is something which will also be covered in your society chapter section. Okay, when you will be referring to your NCERT books on society from class 11th and 12th, over there also you will be getting a more detailed version of this thing. We won't be going into that much detail, that is for this, the faculty who will be handling the society issue, but I'll be giving you some ideas where they are, who they are, that's it. Okay, some of their linguistic ideas. Now we'll be talking directly about the uprisings, tribal uprisings, why they happened, why they were not able to sustain for long, why they were not able to win against the Britishers. That's what our focus are going to be, and what impact it had on the people who lived in these tribal societies. Okay, that's our focus going to be. Limitations of the tribal uprisings. British response to tribal uprising, that's also what we're going to focus on, that how Britishers handled it. I'll give you an example. Okay, later on, the Nawab of Murshidabad, basically the successors of Nawab of Bengal's family, even they supported Britishers in when the Britishers started curbing the Santhal people in 1850s. Okay, so I'll be telling you that how, except few of the intelligentsia in Calcutta, most of the people actually supported Britishers only in the 19th century when the Britishers were trying to curb the rebellion of the tribals. Okay, so we'll be talking about them. Okay, who all collaborated with the Britishers, I'll be telling you that, and then we'll be talking about the major rebellions. Now we will be talking only about those rebellions who have been directly mentioned in your NCERT. We'll be talking in detail about the Santhal rebellion of 1855, 1856. We'll be talking about the Munda rebellion. There have been a lot of tribal rebellions. Okay, and look, this book Spectrum has been used from almost 7 to 8 years, and all the students refer to it for modern history. And in that, there are in total, if you combine the tribal revolts which have been discussed in Spectrum and the Peasant Revolt, in total there are 43 rebellions. Now, even if I'll tell you about each and every one of these 43 rebellions, that will be futile for you, because by the time you will be either writing your pre-examination or mains examination, remembering the nitty-gritties of 43 rebellions is impossible. I have never met a student who will be able to remember the things, the details of each and every rebellion which happened, where the tribal and peasantry mixed up, combined. Okay, so you have to understand that I'll let you know, since it's there, and I know that most of the students at the end of the day are going to refer Spectrum, no matter what people like us say. So I will tell you that I'll make a compartmentalization of those rebellions also, and I'll put a slide in there. It's not in any NCERTs, but I'll still put it there just to give you an idea, so that when you will be referring to it, you will be able to some kind of segregation, and you will be able to make some idea of it. Okay, we will do that. I'll add those slides, don't worry about that. But we'll be focusing about only those rebellions in detail which are mentioned in NCERT. After the tribals, we'll move to the peasant revolt, and we'll be exactly like the tribals. We'll be talking about the characteristics feature of the peasant uprisings in India. Okay, there are certain features which are different between the tribals and the peasants. We'll be talking about it. Then we'll also be talking about the peasant uprising before 1857 and after 1857. There was a very important change. Before 1857, I'm telling you directly itself, here itself. Before 1857, the tribal revolts were violent in nature. After 1857, the revolts were non-violent in nature, and they were ready to take or use the European or the English judicial system for their benefit. Okay. Causes of the Peasants Rebellion: Indigo Revolt 1859-1862, Pabna Agrarian Rebellion, Deccan Agrarian Riots 1876, new character of the Peasant Rebellion. This is the one thing I was talking about, that after 1857 how it changed. So all these things we'll be discussing. There are a few of the revolts which will be focusing, that is the Indigo Revolt 1859, Pabna Agrarian Rebellion, that also happened somewhere around it started 1859 onwards, Deccan Agrarian Riots 1876. These are the three peasant rebellion which we have to discuss. Okay, so let's proceed, let's start. If you want to make a note, whatever you feel like is important, make a note of this. Otherwise also you'll be getting the PDF of the slide, so make a note if you want. Chalo. So tribals, let's begin with the tribal section first. Okay, so all these pictures which are visible on the screen are there in your NCERTs. Okay, all the pictures which are available on the screen are there in your NCERT. So first remember that thing. Now understand, this is the picture of Sidhu Manjhi, leader of the Santhal rebellion. Santhal rebellion becomes very, very important now, because India's new president she belongs to Santhal community, and so the Santhal rebellions become more important, from at least for the upcoming examination next year, 2023, 2024, all the examinations. Okay, now so if you see that this is map of India, and this map is also available in your NCERT. Okay, so you will see that these are the areas where tribal groups live in India, and these are the name of the various tribal groups. As I have told you, that don't think that tribals only live in the Chhattisgarh and the Jharkhand region. And as you can see, the Santhal, Munda, Oraon, these people live in what we now call as Jharkhand. Beyond this, in Odisha, there is extensive number of tribals and different groups: Bonda, Kandha, Koya, okay, Khons. Then you will Chhattisgarh, Baigas, Maria, Gonds. Gonds are the highest, the maximum number of tribals in India are from Gond community. Okay. Now, in Maharashtra, you will find Banjaras. In Andhra Pradesh, again, Banjaras are in this region, so they are found both in Maharashtra and Andhra Pradesh. Okay, Maharashtra and Telangana, actually, not Andhra Pradesh. Gonds are there in Telangana and Andhra Pradesh both. In Kerala, you will find Irulur and Mala. Okay, there are other tribes in Nilgiri Hills also, which are even not mentioned here. Then Van Gujars and Rathawa are there in Gujarat. Bhil community, Bhils have been over the period so much mixed up in the normal day-to-day thing that they are usually not even considered tribe many a time. Okay, Bhils have been over the period assimilated too much into the common society in Rajasthan. So Bhils are there, Sahariyas are there. Okay, Madhya Pradesh, there are Banjaras again, Gonds are there. Uttarakhand, there are Bhutias. Okay, Himachal Pradesh, Gaddis, Van Gujars are there, and Northeast, so almost more than 90% of the population in northeastern states are tribals. Okay, and if you see in a way, these are the most of them are the original kind of are considered to be the original inhabitant or the oldest inhabitant of this subcontinent. Okay, so you keep that thing in mind. Now, Santhal prisoners, this is a picture, again these are just the pictures. This is a picture, these are Santhals tribals who were taken as prisoners by the Britishers after they lost in 1855-1856. This is a picture of 1861 when the cotton was taken from a village to the mandi. This is a picture of that. Okay, I'll be discussing about this and I'll be telling you the importance of cotton. Okay, the agrarian revolt of 1876, the Deccan Agrarian Revolt. Okay, that all happened because of cotton only, and we'll be coming to it in detail of the whole story. Okay, this region is famous for cotton production. Okay, not actually this whole region, this ye chota wala Konkan nahi, baki Konkan ke piche ka region. Okay, so let's begin the classes. These all pictures are there in your NCERT, the new NCERT. just want to make sure that when you are going through your NCERT, you don't feel like, अरे ये क्या पढ़ा दिया, photos तो अलग ही दिख रही हैं. So I've just made sure that the pictures and everything are also there. चलो, characters of tribal society. Okay. These are more general thing, generic thing. These are not about history only. Okay, these are the general features of the tribal society, because when we are talking about tribal society, this is a very basic issue that before going into their historical understanding, we need to understanding how these people live, how these people think. Okay, so in a single lecture, I can't tell you the whole details about the tribals. Okay, but there are certain standard foundational points which you should know before going and trying to understand anything related to the tribals. Okay, so community ownership of the property, and these concepts were there even implemented among the rest of the Indians before Britishers came most of the time. So community ownership of the of property. What is this community ownership? Right now, what we know is there are small land plots. ठीक है, जहाँ भी जमीन मिली प्लॉट बना के बेच दो. That's how India works. Okay, every other small city, tier 2, tier 3 city has a development authority. Okay, that new Okhla Industrial Development Authority becomes Noida. Okay, then Gurgaon has a development authority, Agra has a development authority, ADA, Lucknow has a development authority, LDA. Okay, every other place, every other city in India has a development authority. And what's the work of the development authority? There is an inner city, and whatever the area outside the city is, take that area, make some roads, put some poles, make some drainage system, worst kind of drainage system, and then make small plot and sell it to people who were earlier living in the city. Now they will come there, they will live, the city will become bigger, then population will increase, and then the same thing will be repeated again and again and again. The size of the city will increase. That is what is going on. Okay, so this plotization of the country is going on by the development organization, development authorities and all the districts. Okay, but what they are doing basically, they are handing you over the ownership of the plot. Okay, now suppose you didn't need to have own the land, just because you live in the district. Suppose there is some basic idea that just because you are born, suppose you are born in Bhopal, and just because of the basic thing that you are born in Bhopal, because of that right, you have got the opportunity to go out in the outskirts of Bhopal. जंगली था 15 साल पहले तक सब कुछ. Just go outside Bhopal and take a plot, put your tent and start living there. Okay, so if everyone starts doing that, that can also work. Every time it's not required that you have to purchase a piece of land and claim every time, no, this is my right and I'll live here. Okay, if the whole community is living like that, that's not an issue. So back in the day, even rest of the India was living like that only before the Cornwallis and first Warren Hastings and then Cornwallis came up with their land settlement system. Okay, but the tribals continue to live in the same manner. So community ownership of property still exists among them. Okay, community ownership of property still exists among them. After that, gender roles are leniently defined. Now, what I mean to say by gender roles are leniently defined is, we live in a very patriarchal society, and that's everyone know. Okay, the role of the man and of woman are very much defined. There is not much scope, okay, of role reversal till like 20-30 years back only. It's only after 1990s that you see that in the bigger city, at least Delhi, Mumbai, Bangalore, Chennai, you will see the some kind of rise of the role of women folks in the way the things are done. Otherwise, all the decision making, everything ended up in hands of man. Their decisions are considered to be final. So this is called a basically patriarchal society. Okay, there are certain stances in India of matriarchal society also, for example Kerala, but over there also you have seen that in the past 100 years, although the society is considered to be matriarchal, but the decision making again ends up in the hands of men. Okay, but in the tribal society this is not the same. Okay, in the tribal society most of the time the gender roles are very leniently defined. So you will see, and that's even visible even now. I'll give you a very basic, crude and like effective example. You see, whenever the Naxalites even attack, okay, you will see the participation of women folks in the Naxalite militant groups are much more than what otherwise any other militant groups have anywhere in the world. Okay, consider them terrorists, fine, that's okay. Okay, they are standing against the country, they are terrorists, fine. But even in that terrorist group also, if you look into that, you will find that in comparison to any other terrorist group in the world, the representation of women folks in there is much more. That is because of the gender roles are not very straightforward defined in the society, and it's beneficial. Okay, because we'll be going into detail and I will be telling you how in the 200 years back, when all these rebellions started, tribal women played very important role, and not only like in the supporting role. I'll be telling you later about 1857 revolt also, and what really happened in Mathura. Okay, and I still remember there was a very interesting song in which people used to recite in 1857 around Mathura, where a woman says that everyone's husband is stealing silver cutlery from Britisher's house, and all my husband has brought home is a handkerchief. He was very upset. But the thing where I'm trying to focus here is in the main society, if you see what we call as main society, the roles were even defined. But even in tribal society, you will find even the women were stealing the stuff when it comes to fighting. Okay, so that you have to keep in mind. The gender roles were not very much straightforward defined. Okay, they mostly practiced animism, and animism, for those students who don't know, look, agar animism is a kind of a religion only. For British understanding back in the 18th and the 19th century, when they didn't understand any specific kind of religion, they called it animism. Okay, and if you go into details of animism, you will find that it has more than 75 to 80% overlapping with the basic practices of Hinduism only. Okay, so any kind of religion, and basically in animism, with the kind of animism which is followed in India, because all the religions which are not understood by the Western world, they have given it a generic name, animism. Okay, that animation wala word, it's from the same etymological roots. Okay, so in the animism, first of all, you understand that most of the time they celebrate and they pray to forest. Okay, you go to any tribal areas, half of the time either they are praying to a mountain or a forest or an animal. Okay, so that you need to understand, that are most of the time the representation in animism. अगर कुछ नहीं मिल रहा, there is nothing to set an idea, set an agenda, जाके अवतार देख लेना, the movie जेम्स कैमरून वाली. Okay, so you'll get an idea. Now, livelihood, tribal's livelihood is basically hunting and food gathering and obtaining forest produce. Now look at this very effectively. Nowhere agriculture, farming, these things are mentioned. Tribals are not someone who usually do farming. Past 200 years, first they were coerced, and later on they also learned that kind of doable. So they also started doing agriculture, but the basic characteristics of tribal people don't put them on the route of settling down and doing farming and those things. So these are some of the basic characteristics of tribal people you need to understand. Their gender roles, okay, their community ownership, their gender roles, their different gender role basically, their religious standings, their religious stance, and finally their source of livelihood, their occupation. These things have to be known. Okay, so these are the basic characteristics of the tribal society, okay, throughout India. Now let's move forward. Two other tribal groups about whom you need to know are the Pahadiyas and the Santals. Okay, now who are the Pahadiyas and who are the Santals? Okay, so Pahadiyas are the people from hill tribes in Rajmahal Hills. Now the first question will be, sir, ye Rajmahal Hill kya hai? Where is Rajmahal Hill? So physical geography, please try to go through your NCERT books in physical geography. Meanwhile, I'll show you the map. So if you see this map of India, okay, the region which we now call as the course of Jharkhand, Bihar and Bengal, that region, okay, if you just zoom this whole region, you will find this map. Okay, look, this is This is a map from 1820, 1830. Okay, and thereby that's why this is the spelling of Bhutan here, BOOTN, Bhutan. Okay, this is your Calcutta, and just next, look, this is your Calcutta. Okay, and just next to Calcutta, this whole green shaded region is basically Chota Nagpur Plateau. Okay, and inside it only, this area is called as Jungle Mahal. Okay, so very close to Calcutta, which was the seat of East India Company, lived these people used to live, and there were two. There was one specific tribe, and these were called as Pahadiyas. Now, who are Pahadiyas? From the name only, you can decipher. These are the people who usually must be living on the hilltops. Okay, these are the people who must be living on the hilltops. That's why they are called as Pahadiyas. Okay, on the Pahad means mountain, so Pahadiya people. Now, understand what happened. Okay, so will come to Santhal. First of all, understand what happened. So when the Britishers started taking over more and more territory, okay, back in these times, the only source of income was what? There was only one source of income, that was revenue generated through agriculture. Okay, main source of revenue was whatever agriculture produces there, you take a part of that. If more land is under settlement, more land is under farming, then more revenue will be collected. Basic funda. So what Britishers started doing, let me put this thing for you to understand properly. Okay, 19th century, from the starting, or even the late 18th century. Okay, so we'll just write the 18th and 19th century. Okay, few things. I hope you people are clear if you are attending this lecture. If you haven't done fourth lecture, please finish it off and then come here. Okay, so in the fourth lecture I have explained this thing, that how in 1765 the Diwani rights were given to East India Company for Bengal. Okay, now Britishers, what they wanted to put in more and more area under agriculture. If more agriculture will be done, more production will be there, more surplus will be there. More surplus means more tax. That's their aim. So from 1765 onwards, all they wanted was to increase area under farming. Okay, area under farming has to increase. That was their intention. Okay, now area under farming, how it will increase? You have to make people, land is there, but the people who are living there, they are forest people, they are tribals. You have to make them do farming. Okay, well, इसलिए खुद आके farming थोड़ी करेंगे, और war investing आके करेंगे. You have to make people do farming. Okay, so but these tribal people, I have told you the characteristic feature of the tribal people. They are not interested in doing farming. उनका क्या हो, कहना सेब उग रहा है, सेब गिरेगा, तोड़ के खा लेंगे. Okay, we don't have to do farming. Whatever the fruit we are getting, whatever the products produces we are getting from farms, from the forest, that's enough for us. So these people are not interested in doing farming. So what will be the next step? To make sure that area under farming increase, new settlers will be brought in. Okay, new settlers will be brought in. Everyone has been to Raipur in Chhattisgarh. Okay, if you'll go to Raipur, you will find people having their last name like Mishra, Shukla, Tripathi, Pandey in huge chunk. Okay, and I can say these things to them because I belong to the same community, so मेरा चलता है. ठीक है, आप थोड़ा सा कास्ट पे कमेंट करते हुए बचेंगे. ओके, नहीं तो अपनी कास्ट को जो भी कहना है कहिए, दूसरों को मत कहिए. Fine, thanks sir. So new settlers were brought in. If you'll go to Chhattisgarh even now in Raipur region nearby, you will find people from who usually are from Eastern UP and North Bihar region. Okay, you will find that same last name in Raipur region, in Chhattisgarh. And like, where these people came here? Okay, so you will get to know that Britishers have settled these people from North Bihar and Eastern UP, okay, in the hope of that these people will do agriculture. Now, if these settlers are coming in from outside, what will happen? Clash will happen. Because you are bringing in new settlers, you are removing the tribals from their land and making the settlers do agriculture there. The tribals, the land of the tribals will be taken over and they will retaliate. Aa gaya reason? There is this reason for rebellion. This is enough reason for rebellion, because all the tribals, what they have is their land. The land is gone. What is there for them? So they will retaliate. Okay. So these new settlers, I just gave you an example which you will be able to connect even now. But before the people from North Bihar and Britishers have taken settlers everywhere. Okay, you get to know about Rohingya people. Where are these Rohingyas from? These Rohingyas are actually not Mongoloid people. They are actually not any of the Burmese tribes. They have been taken on the Arakan plains by the Britishers from again Odisha, Bihar, and Bengal region only. But so long back, somewhere around 1826, 1830, that now calling them that they are not Burmese and they are from somewhere else is absurd, because itne saal ho gaye, 200 saal hone ja rahe hain, so it doesn't make sense. But before the settlers I have told you, before them, okay, so the original inhabitant on these lands were the Pahadiya people and Rajmahal Hills. Now, around 1790 to 93, okay, I'll be discussing the land settlement in much more detail in lecture number 9, okay, the British land settlement. But understand this much here, that one of their Governor General, Cornwallis, came up with this famous Cornwallis Code, and this Cornwallis Code defined in detail that how the Britishers want to divide the land and then to generate more and more revenue. Once this system was devised in 1793, you will see that Britishers now started to do what? They now started to get more and more area under agriculture. For this purpose, the first thing they did is remove Pahadiya people from Rajmahal Hills, or at least since they were living throughout the mountain, so they were forced to go up in the mountain. Okay, and on the border area, okay, on the border area, right when the plains started, that area was handed over to the Santhals. Okay, now Santhals were also not, it's not like Santhals were not tribals, Santhals were also tribals, but the Santhals by 1790, 1800, 1810, Santhal community was okay, ready with doing farming. Okay, so there is what it happens, there is a tribal community which says no, under no circumstances we will do farming. Another tribal community says okay, fine, there is no other alternative, there is no proper forest, we are not able to fulfill the needs of our kids, so I will do farming. So Santhals were ready to do farming by 1790, 1800, 1810. So these people were brought in from Bengal, okay, the hinterlands of Bengal, bits of part of Odisha also, and they were allocated this land in the where erstwhile Pahadiyas used to live. Now what Britishers have done? They have created such a scenario that it's but natural that the Santhals and Pahadiyas will fight among themselves, because Pahadiyas will feel that their land has been taken. Santhals will say that hum to agriculture kar rahe hain. So they will fight. Who has created the issue? Britishers. For what? For the economic benefit. But ultimately, who will be at the loss? Two of the native tribes. Okay, so that you need to understand. Now, so basic difference between these people, Pahadiyas, they were never prepared for agriculture. Santhals were okay. So they were dependent upon the forest produce and never participated in farming. They easily took the occupation of farming and cooperated with the company initially. Okay. Initially लिख लीजिए यहाँ पे, because later they will also revolt. Okay. They constantly struggled with the zamindars and later the mighty East India Company. Okay. Now understand this, there is one important thing. So you will say, sir, what used to happen? Some student might think that, sir, what used to happen before the Britishers? because before the Britishers, these tribes were also there, because I just have told you in the starting of the session that these tribes are kind of the most ancient people who are living in the subcontinent. So what used to be the system before the Britishers came in? So when the Mughals were handling the things, when the Mughal Suba of Bengal was there, these tribal people, there was a system carved out for these tribal people, and not only Mughals, but even before the Mughal, even the Delhi Sultanate, even the Sur dynasty, okay, also decided that they will not interfere in the region where tribals live. So those dynasties, those ruling empires were very sure that money is fine, but if these people don't want to collaborate in our structure, we also will just maintain neutrality with them. So while till the time Mughals were there, or Bengal Suba was even there, okay, these people were not disturbed. There was a basic understanding that some form of nominal trade used to happen. Okay, now what do I mean to say by nominal trade? Suppose some of the people from these tribal area, they have some knowledge of some of the old style of Ayurvedic or some kind of jadi booties and all these herbs and all that thing. So they used to bring those herbs to the market, and in return they used to get some basic salts or some basic spices which they needed for their food, and that's it. So this was the thing which used to be maintained in before the Britishers came into being. But Britishers, because of their crudest form of what we can call is greed, basically, that money at any cost, they interfered among these people. So that you have to keep it. Now, so Pahadiyas started facing difficulties first with the zamindars, because in the 1810, 1820s, zamindars were trying to, this permanent settlement zamindars wanted to get more and more revenues. So whatever area were given to Santhals, they were pushing the Santhals to go even more in the Pahadiya region and start doing farming there. And when the Santhals moved further into the Pahadiya region, the Pahadiyas retaliated, first against the Santhals, then against the Zamindar, and finally against the East India Company. Santhals were also finding it difficult, okay, because at the end of the day, they were also tribals only, okay, who had just started doing farming almost 30 years back. So you will see that by 1830, the Santhals found it so difficult that a small level of rebellion started among the Santhals themselves against the company. And at this point, company's officials also thought of the same thing which I just explained to you, that what the Mughals were doing, why these people were not rebelling against the Mughals, why they are rebelling against us. So they were informed that in the Mughal times, there were confined land for these people where no one else used to come. Okay, so after this small rebellion, okay, Santhals, a small rebellion, Santhals were given a specific region of called as Damine Kohi. Now what is Damine Koh? It's a Persian word, because Mughals used to use this name Damine Koh, and I'll explain this. Okay, suppose this is your mountain. Okay, this is your mountain ranges. Fine, these are your mountain ranges. Okay, now this region, or just give me a moment. And we'll make green grass. Okay, so this region, okay, on the lower side of the mountain. Okay, these lower side of mountain regions were given to whom? Were given to the Santhals. Okay, these regions were given to the Santhals. And on the top, okay, this region, Pahadiyas used to live. Okay, this region on the top. Okay, it was decided that this region will be defined for the Santhals only, and under no circumstances this region will be allowed to anyone else to farm or anything, not even the permanent settlement zamindars. Zamindars will also be zamindars, the permanent settlement zamindars will also be out of this region, and this region used to be called as Damine Koh. Okay, Koh means mountain in Persian. Daman is again a Persian word for the boundary line or the border line. Okay, the ending point of the mountain. Okay, so that area were handed over to the Santals when in 1832, 1833, after a small revolts of there against the British East India Company. Understood what is Damine Koh, how the whole concept of Damine Koh came in? Fine. Now, come here. This worked fine for a few years, 10-15 years. But by 1850, the situation again became difficult. With Dalhousie in power in 1848, okay, Dalhousie started a war in Punjab, and after that, the revenue demand increased. Okay, there was some drought situation, and in these situations, the Santals found it difficult to pay the rent. And when they found difficult to pay a rent, again the revolt started. Again the revolt started. Okay, again the revolt started, and this time, against the company and the zamindars only in 1850, and after that a separate region. After this revolt ended, again a revolt started. I'll explain you what really happened in the revolt also. Okay, Sidhu Murmu, Kanu Murmu will discuss the details of the Santals again in detail. Just understand here, just in comparison of Pahadiyas and Santals, what happened. So after this another rebellion of Santals in 1855-56, this was also curbed by the Britishers with immense difficulty. Okay, and when they were trying to curb this rebellion against the Santals, the Nawab family of Murshidabad also supported the Britishers only. In total, this time almost 15,000 Santals were killed. Okay, and finally, after this, British government also thought that something has to be done, and therefore a Santhal Pargana were established. Okay, Pargana is somewhat very equivalent to a district. In the Mughal times, Pargana used to be the standard nomenclature. In the British time, district system came after Warren Hastings in 1773. Now, Santhal Pargana was again created after 1856 to make sure that secure region will be provided to Santhal people to do agriculture, and they don't have to fight again and again with the zamindars of the permanent settlement system. Okay, so this is the basic thing which you need to understand. Now let's move forward. This map I have explained. Fine. Now, causes of the revolts. I have already explained what were the major causes. So all the farmland, all the forest land was taken over, deforestation was done, people were removed, the land was given and for farming purposes. So deforestation and for policy of converting forest into farming lands. Okay, so basically the whole process of Bedakhi. Okay, removal of the original inhabitants of the forest. Okay, then displacement and disruption in the means of livelihood. What it is doing, if you are removing the people from the land where they used to live from ancient times, you are basically displacing the people. If you displace the people, people will retaliate. They have no other way of occupation. Look, you need to understand, this is not the 21st century society that you work in an IT company and you live in a tier 3 city and somehow because of internet it works out. So suppose if one day you have some difficulty at your home, so you will go to your uncle's place or auntie's place and work from there. No, you live in a forest. That forest is your life. Your occupation is fruit torna. Okay, if your occupation is fruit torna, then there is no other way out for you. If someone removes you from the forest, you are out of your job, you are out of your house. Okay, person out of job and out of house, what he will do or she will do? They will rebel. Okay. Objective was to reclaim control of forest and throw away the Dakus. Now, what are the Dakus? Now, Daku, I think everyone know what Dakus are. Okay, bandits, Dakus. So this is a standard word which was used even by the tribal people. So they use the word Daku for anyone who was outsider, anyone who collaborated with the East India Company, Okay, a huge misconception is that the tribal people used to call Daku only to the East India Company. No, Daku, or in many books the word used is Diku. It's basically Daku only. Okay, Diku or Daku, either the officials of East India Company, okay, Europeans, basically Europeans, or plus any of their collaborators. So any native, any of the collaborators, so any of the zamindars, that is zamindars, were also considered part of this Dakus only. Now, why I am focusing too much on a random word? Because these random words are again and again asked in the examination. I'll still tell you the example in few minutes how the specific word has been asked in the examination, that how, what this word signify, and so you have to know these things. Okay, so the objective was to reclaim forests and throw away Dakus. Violation of animistic belief, because suppose there is a tree from 500 years and for your religious beliefs that tree is your god, और कोई अंग्रेज साहब आए और उन्होंने उस ट्री का टेबल बनवा लिया, so this is not going to work now. That tree was your god and that person is using it for a table, that won't be acceptable. Okay, that was not acceptable for tribal people, that won't be acceptable anywhere in the world. So there will be retaliation. Okay, change in the relations with the new rulers. Now I have explained this thing in back also, that in the Mughal times and even in the Delhi Sultanate time, during the times of Sur dynasty, it was given importance that not much intervention was done when it came to the native people or the tribals. Okay, but Britishers were totally changed this thing, trying to take more and more area under farming. They were ready to go on to any extent, and that's what they did. Now you can write these causes of tribal revolts in a generic sense, because in the examination, okay, the questions won't be asked in a very specific sense. Okay, question won't be asked as such ki Sidhu or Kanu Murmu ka importance, what were their role in the Santhal rebellion. Question won't be asked like this. Question will be asked in this sense. Okay, what caused tribal revolts in the 18th and the 19th century India? A more generic sense. So that thing you have to keep it. Now, limitation of a tribal uprising. There are certain limitations. Obviously, there are certain limitations. What are these limitations? Okay. Now, the tribal people, okay, living in forest, they were good hunters, and because they were good hunters, they were good in hand-to-hand combats, and they were also had their small the arrowhead and all that. So whatever equipments they had, they were able to use, but they had nothing in competition to the technological advancement which Europeans had. They didn't had a full-fledged infantry. They didn't had a full-fledged gunpowder system to be used, okay, against the Europeans. So first of all, they were all the limitations of tribal uprising is that they were not technically advanced as the Europeans, neither technically, not militaristically, they're also not advanced. Now after that, all these revolts were localized. So it was not like the look, in a way Pahadiyas were also fighting Britishers only, Santhals were also fighting Britishers only, but effectively if you'll see, they were fighting among themselves also. So even on the smaller level, it was very few times when the tribals cooperated among each other. It happened once or twice, but not always. So these tribal revolts, first of all, they were always economic in nature. There was no bigger concept of idealization. Leave over nationalism and those things, that came pretty late in the later part of 19th century, but no basic idea except the economic difficulties they were facing. And after that, the second thing what you need to know is all these revolts were regional in nature. Okay, if there is a revolt going on in Chota Nagpur, 50 years down the Calcutta, no one even knew that there is a revolt going on in Chota Nagpur. Okay, so these things you have to know. Now, absence of support from natives. So the other locals who were not non-tribal people, the people who lived in Calcutta who were still native Indians only. Okay, back then there was no conceptualization of India, but the people who were native of this land but living in the city, okay, they had no affection towards the tribal people. So they actually found themselves to be much closer to the Britishers. Okay, these things changed only after 1860s, 1870s only, and before, not before that. Okay, regional extent, Kota Nagpur, Jharkhand, Utkal Plains, these region only. Utkal Plains, for those who don't know, is Odisha. The northern part of Odisha is called as Utkal Plain. You must have heard Indian national anthem. Punjab, Sindh, Gujarat, Maratha, Dravid, Utkal, Bengal. Utkal is Odisha. Okay. Traditional and conservative outlook. So they were not like, okay, fine, this is happening in the 19th century, but it's not like they know the concept of French Revolution. It's not like they are fighting for liberty, equality, and fraternity as per the Western idea. Okay, their reasoning was also localized and isolated. Now, one thing which I differ a bit, that what these people were fighting for was a community approach, and you can't just reject the community approach as such of just by calling it as traditional and conservative outlook. Okay, if you go there, if you'll go as per 21st century standard, even Adam Newman will be fighting with these people and not with the British idea. Okay, and we considered people like Adam Newman to be the more modernistic ones. Okay, so lack of any technical know-how. Okay, I just explained, lack of technical know-how was one of the major limitation when these people started fighting the Britishers. Okay, let's move forward. So we just discussed the limitation of tribal uprising. Now British response to the tribal uprising. Now what was the major response to the tribal uprising? How Britishers handled these tribal uprisings? So they took military action. Okay, for the coal uprising, coal mutiny, Santhal uprising, Santhal rebellion, all these were handled by military action of the British East India Company. Before 1857, none of the tribal revolts were handled by any other method except military methods. And you need to understand here that among the Indian tribals, back in the day, there was no conceptualization of fighting, or sorry, of surrendering or trying to reach a understanding or ceasefire. No, these concepts were not there. And even the British officers have written in their diaries, their personal records, that many a time it happened that they knew that they have better firepower, and they were like 4,000 Santhals in the front, and they know that these Santhals will be killed, but there is no other option because Santhals are going to fight. They don't have any other concept except to fight against the Dakus. So there is a sense of pity also among some of the officers, but the whole idea, the structure of East India Company was such that they fought the Masoom tribal people. In mass capital punishment, and this was one of the biggest problems. As I just told you, in the Santhal rebellion of 1855-1856, almost 15,000 Santhals were killed. Almost 60,000 participated, out of which 15,000 were killed. Fine. Process of pacification. This process of pacification happened in 1830s. I told you, first they were given some of the region, and then Damine Kohi was made in 1832, and then in 1856, 1857, just immediately immediately before revolt of 1857, Sipahi mutiny, Britishers were somehow resolved the issue in the Santhal region, and they established Santhal Pargana also. So it's not like pacification was not done. Even if you'll go in detail, even in the new NCERT, it's written that there have been instances where the tribal leaders were personally corrupted by the British officers. Okay, so those things were also happening. Okay, fine. So what I just told you is the rebellion which were there. Okay, and we'll come to the Santhal rebellion and few other. Okay, but understand this thing, that if you are referring to your spectrum, okay, because I told you that although in your NCERT all the tribal revolts are not there, but I know, and that since all the coaching institutes refer to these standard books, and they will be not only Sunya, but every other coaching institute will be using all the information given in different books. So I just want to make sure that you go through these tribal revolts on your own time, okay, whenever you are free. Okay, Santhal I will explain. Okay, Pahadiya, okay, kind of explained already. Okay, Santhal under Tika Manji happened initially. Okay, then beyond this, Chuar uprising, Tamar revolt, Kol mutiny, Ho and Munda uprising. Okay, Pond uprising, Koya uprising, Bhil revolt, Koli, Ramosi, Khasi uprising. Okay, Garo, Khasi, Jaintia region, and what we now call as Meghalaya and nearby region. So all these tribal revolts took place, and all these tribal revolts took place against Britishers only. Now, when you'll be reading these tribal revolts, few things you need to understand. That the reasoning for all of these tribal revolts is almost the same. Okay, the economic difficulties because of the new governing system. Okay, the difficulty was same. The economic exploitation, by new regime, that is the East India Company. Okay, that is East India Company, and that was the major reason for all the tribal revolts. Okay, whether it was happening in Garo, Khasi or Jaintia hills, or whether it was happening by the Kol tribal people. Okay, the reason was almost in 99% case this only, economic exploitation. Now, in certain cases, economic exploitation was happening directly by the East India Company. In certain cases, economic exploitation was happening through some representative, and usually the zamindars. Okay, but it was happening either by or on the behalf of East India Company. So you need to remember this thing. Now, fine, this is done. Chalo. So let's move. A few which we should know, which is very essential, like Santhal rebellion. I told you Santhal rebellion is very important, specifically in this case when the president now, Draupadi Murmu ji, she is from Santhal community. So it is very essential that you give with more, and Sidhu Murmu and Kanu Murmu themselves are Murmus. So it's kind of connected only. So you have to. Okay. So led by the two brothers, Sidhu Murmu and Kanhu Murmu. Okay. It started in 1855-1856, and understand this thing that almost the situation was so bad that British government, and this is just an extra information, British government in 1850s has kept a reward of 10,000 rupees on the two brothers. Okay. Another information, it's not like only Sidhu and Kanhu Murmu participated. I told you that among the tribals, the gender identity was not very specified. So even the sisters of Sidhu and Kanhu Murmu participated in the rebellion. Almost 60,000 Santhal people fought against the East India Company, and finally 15,000 were dead. Okay, the tribal revolt was totally crushed by after Sidhu and Kanhu were killed in 1856, but militancy continued for another 10 years. ओके, मिलिटेंसी ऐसे होती है जैसे अभी आपको कई बार लगती है कि मिलिटेंसी हो रही है इन द रेड जोन, व्हाट वी नाउ कॉल एज द नक्सलाइट रीजन. Militancy continued for another 10 years until the British East India Company government passed in 1866 the Santhal Pargana Act. This was the act I was telling you through which the Santhal Pargana was made. Okay, and so once Santhal Pargana was separately made, all the Santhal from Bengal, what we now call as Odisha, some part of Bihar, they all moved in this region only. Okay, and Pahadiyas were removed from this region, so they don't clash among themselves also. Okay, so they were in steps later on, and later on steps were pacifying in nature. But the initial reaction was extreme brutal, where 1/4 of the people who fought were killed by the British East India Company's native infantries, native army men. Okay. Non-tribals were not allowed to purchase land in the tribal areas. This was the basic feature. This is just a picture which is, I think so, it's there in your NCERT also. Just made this colored one also. Attack by 600 Santhal upon a party of 50 sepoys, 40th Regiment Native Infantry, illustrated in London News 1856. Okay, so this was there in London newspaper. These are the Santhal peoples. They are fighting the British East India Company army, which is here. Okay, fine. So let's move forward. This is the Santhal thing. I told you that twice happened. Initially in 1833, Damine Kohi was evolved. I have explained this thing, so no need to explain it further. Now, for example, in 2016, look, for example, in preliminary examination of civil service examination, prelims round, in 2016, there was this question. After the Santhal uprising subsided, what were the measures taken by the colonial government? Okay, so what were the measures taken by the colonial government? First statement goes as simple. The territories called as Santhal Pargana was created. We have just seen Santhal Pargana Act was passed. In the aftermath, it was a pacification process by the government of British East India Company. So, or British government actually, because by the time Santhal Pargana Act was passed, British East India Company's power was shifted in hands of British government. So, British did that. So, this statement is right. Second statement, it became illegal for a Santhal to transfer land to non-Santhal. This is also a feature of the Santhal Pargana Act of 1866. As I have told you, or it was mentioned in last slide, that for the non-Santhals, non-tribals, it was not allowed to buy, purchase any land in the Santhal Pargana. So this is also correct. So both A1 and 2, C option is correct for this one. Okay, in 2016, this question was asked in the examination. Okay, prelims round. So similarly, let's move forward. So even from the NCERT book only, you can make these questions. It's not very difficult. Okay, let's move forward. Okay, let's talk about the Munda rebellion. Munda also rebelled twice, 1850s and 1895 to 99. Okay, 1850 Munda rebellion is not that important. Rebellion happened, it was crushed. The interesting Munda rebellion is Birsa Mundas. Okay, and at the time of Birsa Munda, okay, Birsa Munda, understand that Birsa was born in 1874, 1875. Exact date is not clear. Sometime it's written 74 and 75. And Birsa Munda, even in present days and time, plays a very important role in the historical identity of the Jharkhand people. Okay, he is usually referred to as Bhagwan Birsa. And if you go to Ranchi, the airport in Ranchi is also named after Birsa Munda only. Okay, so Birsa was born in 1874-75, and in his young age, he was first among his community who was enrolled in a missionary school. Now, missionary school is Christian Catholic school. Okay, and over there, Birsa got this first idea of this new religion, Christianity. So Birsa knew about Christianity, had a basic understanding also. At this time, Birsa converted also to Christianity, and his name was changed to David. Okay, his name was changed to David. But then you will see that Birsa realized, or his family also realized, that this is wrong, and they came back into the fold of their original religion. Okay, the tribal animism, whatever animistic ideas they used to follow before that. Now, some time went by. At the age of 20-21, you will see that in 1894-95, somewhere around that time, Birsa rose and said that he had a dream. Now, how Birsa portrayed himself was very much on the biblical lines. Okay, so just like how the whole story goes for whether it was Prophet Muhammad or in the times of biblical ideas, okay, that Birsa also said that he saw the God, he met the God, and now he has met the God and he has this power of the gods. So now he is a representative of the God on the earth, and he led his people against the East India Company, and they wanted to remove the Dakus, remove the outsiders from the region. Now Birsa's thing is pretty interesting. Okay, and we have to be very crystal clear, is that at this time Birsa was talking about Ulugulan. Okay, now that's the name used for uprising by them. Okay, and Birsa specifically led the whole movement almost for 4 years. They usually preferred doing guerrilla warfare against the East India Company native infantries. And finally, Birsa was arrested in 1899 and then he died in the jail. Okay. His followers always used to believe that Birsa had some magical powers, some healing powers, okay, and through which the bullets of the East India Company can't affect him. But you know, these things happen and we are not going to go into details whether it was true or not, okay. No, don't want to hurt people's sentiments, but you have to understand that this much is what happened with the Birsa. He led a tribal armed rebellion. It was famously called as Ulgulan. As I told you, this is the word which was used by them for the uprising. The word uprising is called as Ulgulan. Okay. Kota Nagpur Tenancy Act. You will see that although he was arrested and jailed and all that happened in 1899, okay, and he died in jail itself. Once he came out of jail also, and then he restarted the whole thing, then he was re-arrested. Those things are there. In 1899, after that, still there was some sense of militancy was there, until in 1908, the British government passed Kota Nagpur Tenancy Act, which was very similar to what was act passed in 1866 for the Santhal people. So this time there was a tribal land defined for the Munda tribal people also, just on the lines of Santhal Pargana Act. Just like Santhal Pargana Act was passed to define a land for the Santhal people, similarly Kota Nagpur Tenancy Act was passed in 1908, almost 8 years or 9 years after the demise of Birsa, to pacify the militant activism of the Munda tribesmen. Okay, so that was the outcome of Munda rebellion. Okay, so after this the rebellion died down. Now again, there was a question in 2020 prelims round in civil service examination with reference to the history of India. Ulgulan, or the Great Turbulent, is the description of which of the following event? Okay, the revolt of 1857, the Mapila rebellion of 1921, the Indigo revolt of 1859-1860, Birsa Munda's revolt of 1899 and 1900. So the answer is D. Okay. So as I just was telling you a few minutes back that these things will happen. They will just put in specific keywords and will hope that you remember it. Okay. So that you have to know. Now let's move forward. Let's move to the peasants. Okay. We have seen in detail about we kind of finished off the very definition of peasantry, and I explained you that what's the basic difference. Ultimately it was a class divide. Those who were at the bottommost strata, whether in the peasantry section or in the tribal section, they were the most impacted, most exploited. Now we have to move and discuss about peasant revolution. Okay, just so let's move, and let me tell you before, since we are talking about peasant and I explained you while talking about peasantry that these were the people who were actually doing farming. Okay, they were mostly farmers. So their problem was something else, totally different from tribals. It was not like that they were removed from their land, but they were exploited mostly to produce more, to give more revenue, to generate more revenue from the land. Okay, so you need to understand here some basic of the dynamics here. Again, this is not in your NCERT, but this is required to have a basic understanding. For example, in 1722, okay, in 1722, when Murshid Quli Khan was the Nawab of Bengal, and Bengal was in proto-industrialist age, okay, then the overall revenue collected by the state was 1.429 crore, 1 crore 42 lakh, okay, 1.429 crore. In 1764, the year when Battle of Buxar took place, okay, so the situation was very bad. The Nawab and the company were fighting among each other. Okay, so in that year, only 81 lakh rupees as revenue was collected from Bengal. But you see, in 1771, the year after the Great Bengal famine, okay, Great Bengal famine, the revenue collection was 2.3 crore, even more than what Murshid Quli Khan was ever able to collect. So what it was, whether the British were excellent in revenue collection, whether they have devised some excellent methodology, okay, that in mere amount of 7 years they increased the revenue collection from 81 lakh to 2.34 crore. Price the number, even though only in 1770 the Bengal has seen the Great Bengal famine, where 1/3 of the total population has either died or moved away. No, but they were collecting revenue far in excess than what was taken ever before in the past, as well as they were using all the exploitative methodology to gather as much money as they can for the dividend of East India Company. So because of this, who are effectively getting most exploited? The people who are at the bottommost strata, the peasantry, the farming class. Okay. So that you have to know, and that's why this graph was plotted for you. Now, before moving forward and before going into details of the difficulties of the farmers, we need to know about permanent settlement. What is permanent settlement, and about the Rayatwari and Mahalwari system, those things we will be looking separately. But permanent settlement, what it is, and I'll explain few of the basics of, otherwise you won't be able to understand it. So, देखो, permanent settlement. Okay. Okay. Rayatwari settlement. Okay. And Mahalwari settlement. These are the three most prominent methods of revenue collection in the British times. Usually these have to be referred in your chapter number or lecture number 9. Okay, when we are discussing about the British economic system in India, over there we'll be looking into it in much more detail. But since we are talking about the peasantry, their problems, okay, you need to have some basic idea, okay, of what were the, because the main problem was exploitation for because of revenue collection. So थोड़ा सा idea मैं दे देता हूँ, otherwise it will become very difficult. So in the disintegration chapter, disintegration of Mughal Empire, I have taught you that in 1712 Zulfikar Khan, okay, the Wazir of Dhandar Shah, had restarted or used the Izaradari system. Okay, Izaradari system. And about the Izaradari system, I have told you that it was a bidding system, but ultimately made the whole system even more corrupt. Okay, when in 1765, after Treaty of Allahabad, after Treaty of Allahabad, the power went into the hands of the Diwani collecting, the tax collecting power went into the hands of East India Company. They thought that the easiest way forward will be the same, that we should take over what was the already existing system, that is Izaradari system. Okay, so they thought like, let's follow the Izaradari system. But Izaradari system led to the Bengal famine situation, and we'll be talking about it in separate section also in much more detail, that what exactly they did wrong, which led to the Bengal famine. But for the meantime, you understand that Izaradari system was also neither it was providing them enough revenue which they wanted to collect from Bengal, nor it was sustaining the people. So both sides were finding it difficult, and therefore in 1772, when a new governor general, okay, Warren Hastings was appointed. Okay, Warren Hastings. Now Warren Hastings from 1840s itself had served in India and knew the difficulties of India very well. So Warren Hastings thought that this system is not working because every year the bidding is taking place. So every year these zamindars are in real threat. They are feeling it difficult to collect the amount. So at this time he came up with this system that we will do the bidding system, but instead of 1 year we will do it for 5 years. Okay, we will do it for 5 years. So you will see now in 1772 he came up with new system, and you don't have to remember the name of the system. Okay, it's a 5-yearly system. Okay, he implemented this 5-yearly system in 1772. He implemented the 5-yearly system in 1772, and it stayed on till 1777. It stayed on till 1777. Okay, this 5-yearly system was in a way was a izaradari system only, but instead of the bidding was not done for on an annual basis, but it was done for 5 years. And at the end of 5 years, again he found that the overall collection of revenue in the 5 years was much lesser than what it would have been done if izaradari system would have been applied on the annual basis. So under these circumstances, he found it even more difficult. And so he appointed a new committee to look into the issue. Okay, that what can be done and what is the real pricing of the land in India. Because by this time, the land was not demarcated and land was not holded in perpetuality to by anyone in India. Okay, the people only used to do agriculture. There was zamindars, but zamindars were also not the owner of the land. Okay, the community ownership in a way existed till then. So he appointed a committee, they called as Amini Committee or Amini Commission. And always remember, Amini Commission is the first commission ever appointed in India in the modern times. Okay, so Britishers appointed this Amini Commission to look into this issue. Okay, and from the observations of Amini Commission, you will see after this the whole setup for permanent settlement will evolve. Okay, so let me give you some of the factual information and then we'll move forward. You will see that in 1772 East India Company implemented 5-yearly system, and the important thing here is you don't have to remember this quinquennial settlement. Quinquennial means 5-yearly. Okay, this is not something which specifically Britishers did. Quinquennial means 5-yearly system. Okay, it was based on ijaradari system, that is revenue collecting rights was given to highest bidder. In 1776, Amini Commission was appointed to look into the real prices of land in Bengal. And after this, look, after this what happened? There was a British Bengal, there was a civil servant, British civil servant. His name was Alexander Dow. Okay, Alexander Dow. So he wrote a book. He wrote a book about history of Hindustan. Okay, in 1777. And in that book, History of Hindustan, he gave the idea of permanent settlement. Whatever understanding he was able to reach that how revenue system worked in India, he thought permanent settlement is a basic idea. Now, what is this permanent settlement? I'll explain this thing in a minute. First, you go through this hierarchy. So, Alexander Dow was the first person who came up with this idea of permanent settlement. Then, in 1776, Philip Francis propounded the idea to make zamindars the permanent proprietors. Okay, so Alexander Dow first of all stated, okay, that look, if somehow we can make few people permanent holder of the land, okay, our problem will be solved, because we then will get to know that whom we have to catch for revenue collection. Then next year, Philip Francis said that why don't these erstwhile zamindar should only be made these permanent settlers. the proprietors of the land, because we already know them. They have done this work for years and years. If we are going to find a new person, we have to train them in the revenue collection work. These people are already there. So it's but natural that give them the proprietary ownership of the land. Till this time, there was no proprietary ownership of land in India. Okay, everything belonged to, in a way, to the king only. In 1789 then, okay, this idea was then what happened in after 1776. In 1784, in the Pitt's India Act, after Pitt's India Act, William Pitt, the British Prime Minister, wrote a minute to the Calcutta Council in Calcutta and told them that this idea given by Philip Francis is a good idea, and you should develop a system based on this, that you make the zamindars the proprietor of the land in India. So based on this, in 1789, finally John Shore created the framework of zamindari settlement, and this zamindari settlement was then implemented as a part of Cornwallis Code in 1793, and then it is called as permanent settlement. This is the whole process of permanent settlement. Now what is permanent settlement, वो भी समझ लो. अभी तो बस ये समझे कि ये hierarchy क्या हुई है. Because in the examination they ask about these people. They have already asked about that out of these 4 names who was involved in the process of permanent settlement, and one of the name was John Shore. So you never know, next year they might ask about Philip Francis or Alexander Dow also. Although this much information is not there in NCERT, this is extra information. I'm just giving you because this has been asked in the exam. Now, let me explain you what actually here permanent settlement means. So, throughout till the Mughal times, there was no actual owner of the land. These Jagirdars, Mansabdar just had the responsibility to collect the revenue from the land. Okay, and the people used to do farming over there. They were also not the owner of the land. There was no this basic concept of ownership of plot. Okay, plotization of India was not done back then. Okay, so but in Britain there was already a system of baron, okay, and lords, okay, and earls, okay. And this system, in this British system, back in Britain, there was defined area proprietorship of the land, which were usually in the hands of the barons. And since this was in the hands of barons, and therefore they thought that something very similar can be used in India. So barons had the permanent proprietorship in Britain, not in India. Okay, so they thought that something on an equivalent line can be developed in India also, and then therefore they came up with the idea of permanent settlements in India. Okay, now if they have to come with the permanent settlement, they also have to appoint someone who will be equivalent to the barons, and then therefore they came up with the idea of giving this responsibility to the erstwhile zamindars only. Okay, and that's how the permanent settlement evolved. Now, what were the details of the permanent settlement? It was decided that whatever revenue will be collected by the zamindars, the zamindar will keep, in Bengal I'm telling you, because this, look, if you ever get confused, always remember that this system was implemented when? In 1793. So the best Britishers could do is implement it in those regions which were in their control in 1793. And all you have to do is just think about it. What were the regions in direct control of Britishers in 1793? Bengal was there after 1765 itself. Okay. Bit of the region of Odisha. Okay. Which, okay, Northern Sarkar kind of region. Okay, Northern Sarkar. Okay. That's it. But rest of the area was not in their direct control. Okay. Rest of the area started coming in their control only in 1792-93 after third battle of Anglo-Mysore war. Half of the Mysore was taken over by then in 1792. So So immediately they can't impose permanent settlement over there. Then the rest of the area by the Marathas, it came in 1803 onwards. In the Carnatic region, although they had good relations with the ruler, but Carnatic also till 1793-94 was controlled by the Nawab of Arcot only. Okay, so therefore permanent settlement was devised usually in this region only. Okay, in some part of northern Sarkar. So it was decided that zamindars will collect the revenues and zamindars will keep 1/11th part for themselves. Okay, and they will give 10/11th of the total revenue to the company. Okay, so that has to be the distribution in permanent settlement. Okay, now let's come back. This is the whole idea of permanent settlement that was needed, and I have explained in a way which was the area. So it was introduced in present day Bengal, Bihar, Odisha, and later in parts of Banaras, northern districts of Madras Presidency. What are the northern districts of Madras Presidency? This region only, which was later called as Northern Sarkar. Okay, Northern Sarkar. This was taken over from Hyderabad. Otherwise, back then Bihar included Bihar, Bengal, and northern Odisha, present day northern Odisha. Okay, so all that region. It was also introduced in the tribal region of Chota Nagpur Plateau, and that actually led to the rebellions in 1830 and 1855. We have already discussed. Okay. The collective revenue was divided between East India Company and Zamindar in the ratio of 10:1. The ratio of 10:1 is only 10/11 and 1/11. ठीक है, थोड़ा सा सी सेट कर लो. चलो. So what was the crisis evolved out of permanent settlement? And this is there in your new NCERT. This whole block diagram is from your new NCERT book only. So what were the major issues after this permanent settlement was implemented? In the permanent settlement, the system evolved that if one of the zamindar is not paying the money on time, okay, he will have to, his property will be taken over and then will be sold off in a bidding process to some other zamindar, and then that money will be used. That was the basic funda. So what they used to do is the same zamindar used to never pay the revenue he had to pay to the British government, and when his property was sold, he will send his own people who will buy the land, and ultimately the ownership will stay on in his hand only. And this was whole Benami property thing for the first time evolved here. So it is not that only British government was very shrewd, okay, even in native zamindars were very pretty corrupt. Okay, so first thing you need to know this. So but the one of the biggest problem over there was excessive revenue demand, because revenue demand was 10/11. One part has to be kept by zamindar and 10 part has to be kept by the British government. This was way more than whatever has been asked by the Mughals in the past. Now, non-payment of the revenue was one of the major problems which arise because of this, because the revenue demand was so high that no one was able to pay. Now, after this, the zamindar started using petty tricks. For example, Benami property, I just told you, and these things are even done right now. I still remember that back in 2004 or 5, there was this in Mumbai, there was this old hotel which was owned by the family of Dawood Ibrahim, and there was a loan on it, the government taken over it, and now it was sold off. So only 2 people participated in the bidding process because of which government conducted, because everyone was so threatened, because the property was owned by Dawood Ibrahim. And later on people got to know that the person who finally was able to buy the property was somehow related to Dawood Ibrahim only. So this is happening in 2004. This exactly same thing was happening in the 18th century. Okay, so Benami property system evolved. Now, transfer of property to females, what is this? Look, back in 1780s, 1790s, even 1810, 1820s, the idea was very simple. The society was patriarchal, so if any property was owned by the females, British East India Company was not going to take over that property. So zamindars usually what they used to do is they used to transfer property in the name of the females in their family, hoping that British East India Company is not going to act against the females of the family. Although it was seen that Warren Hastings went to the extent of taking over the properties of females even in 1780s and 85. Okay. Then use of Lathials. These were the petty tricks on the grounds, because look what used to happen. Even this thing happens even now. Always remember, after 2006, 2006 Indian Railway decided that it will sell off the scrap iron from the railway centers, railway distribution centers, and the scrap iron selling was happening throughout India. So usually what used to happen is, for the first time, the bidding used to happen through internet, and people from Kerala and Tamil Nadu used to started bidding for purchasing scrap iron from the railway factories in Jharkhand. Okay, when the people from Kerala and Tamil Nadu finally landed up in Jharkhand, okay, the local mafia who were involved in the scrap dealing in Jharkhand never allowed these people to take that iron scrap from Jharkhand and leave without taking. They usually used to kidnap these people and then take ransom from their family in Tamil Nadu and Kerala. Okay, so this was happening in 2006. Something similar used to happen back in 1780s and 1820s, and that is Lathials were there. So suppose there is a zamindar, he is not paying the revenue he is expected to pay, and his property was taken over, and then property was sold off to a new zamindar. Now when the new zamindar ended up coming on the property, there were these people who were basically related to the earlier zamindar. These are called as lathials because they used to have this big lathis, okay, this big staffs, and using that they will never allow the new zamindar to take over the land. So that system, tricks, small petty tricks, are still the same in 21st century which were there in the 18th century. Then struggle between the zamindars and jotedars. Now ye jotedar kya bala hai? So understand now again. So back in the day, back in the late 18th century and early 19th century, zamindars were given this system, okay, by British East India Company, but there were certain farmers who had land, or they, over the period since their projection was well, they started purchasing more and more and more land on their own, and by 1810 and 1820 you will see there was a group of people who were called as jotedar. Okay, these jotedars used to have huge pieces of land, so they didn't had as big land as zamindars used to have, but they used to, if suppose, I'm just giving you a random rough example, suppose a zamindar is having 1000 acre, okay, 1000 acre, the jotedar will have somewhere around 150 acre. Okay, now the family of the zamindar usually used to move to Calcutta, okay, and will expect the revenue collected to be transferred to them, and based on that revenue they used to live in Calcutta, the big city. The jotedars used to always live in the village only, and therefore they over the period became the commanding authority among the smaller farmers. Okay, in certain cases the zamindars started giving the responsibility to jotedars only to collect the revenue, and these circumstances also jotedars started using corrupt practices, and instead of paying whatever was needed, whatever was decided, they were paying far lesser to the zamindar who was living in Calcutta. And this problem is also called as the zamindars leaving their ancestral place and usually going to Calcutta was called as absentee landlordism. Absentee landlordism. Okay, absentee landlordism. Fine. So this jotedar made life of zamindars even more difficult. Okay, so that is another problem which you need to know. So that is mentioned here, the struggle between the zamindar and jotedar. Now understand what is the block diagram says. That the company was on the top when it came to revenue collection. Immediately below the company was the zamindar, who was expected to collect the revenue and give 10/11 to the company and keep 1/11 to himself. Then there were people from whom the zamindar was directly collecting the revenue, and these were the rayats, and how anglicized it was. So they were called as royat, but the Persian word is rayat for farmers. Okay, rayat, R-A-I-Y-A-T, rayat. Okay, so R-A-I-Y-A-T. This is in anglicized form called as rayat. Then in certain cases the rayat further used to have two other people who used to work on their land. So they were called as under rayats. Ultimately, these under rayats were the landless farmers. Landless peasants were the under rayats. Okay. Now, on the other side, the jotedars used to live. The jotedars were basically rich rayats. They have land not as big as zamindar, but their own land. And they also used to hire these rayats, under rayats, to do the actual farming on the ground. Okay. So jotedar usually they officially had to give the revenue from their land to the zamindars. In certain cases, they were also made to collect the revenue from rest of the rayats, or in certain cases, they took over the leadership of the rayats because the zamindar was anyway not present in Calcutta. In all this sense, the jotedar's powers is starting increasing and the power of zamindar started decreasing. And this created a friction between the jotedar and the zamindar. So it is always remember in the late 18th century and earlier 19th century, permanent settlement also, it's not like the only problem is that the revenue demand was too high from the East India Company. The zamindars were unable to pay and ultimately they started exploiting under pressure the people on the ground and the peasantry started feeling difficulties. No, there are very many levels of problems. Sometimes the zamindars were corrupt. Sometimes there were other characters called as jotedar who were also corrupt. Okay, sometimes zamindars were sheer inefficient. They were absentee landlord. So there were a lot of problems, but ultimately the ones who were affected the most were the under rayats or the landless farmers in 99% of the case. Okay, so you just make this diagram. All the details I am telling you is basically details mentioned in the 5th report, which was prepared in the 1830s, 1813, okay, by the British government only. Okay, all the things I am telling you is in the 5th report by the British government in 1830. Now, just like we went through the characters of the farmers or characters of the tribals, we will also go through the characters of the peasant. So their demands were mostly economic only here. They were regional in nature, limited organizational system. They cut across religious and caste lines, and idea of nationalism was not present at all in the 18th and 19th century. So these are the basic points which you have to remember, and I just explained you that again their demands were basically economic, their issues were usually economic. There was nothing much about this whole idea of nationalism present there. Okay, all they wanted is to pay less revenue, that's it. Causes of peasant rebellion: high burden of taxation on peasants and land owning classes both, because the jotedar and zamindars also were demanded very high cost of revenue which was they were unable to pay. Constant threat of eviction, which was back then called as bedakhli. Bedakhli. Okay, this word will be used again and again. This can be asked in the exam also. Okay, जायदाद से बेदखल कर देते हैं आपके parents आपको, something like that. Okay, so that bedakhli used to happen. Suppose there was a small farmer, okay, that under farmers, the tenant farmer, who doesn't have a land and is basically doing the farming, and somehow because of some reason is not able to pay the exact amount of revenue which he was expected to pay. Under these circumstances, the whatever he is paying, that will be taken, but still he will be evicted from the land. Now if he will be evicted from the land, what he will do? He doesn't have any other source of income. He will rebel. Okay, so Bedakli became a very big reason for rebellion. These things will start changing after 1859. You will see, I'll tell you the specific example when Britishers brought in changes in the regulations, okay, to handle the situation of Bedakli and all. Crisis of cash crop. This will also become a very important reason in 1870s, and I'll explain you how the cash crops crisis will basically about cotton. So this was the main reason of peasant rebellions, and now we'll talk about 2 or 3 important peasant rebellions and then we'll move. So one of the most important peasant rebellion is Indigo Revolt. Neel Bidroh. Okay, Neel Bidroh. What happened? So indigo plantation in India started by a French guy. His name was Louis Bonnoud in 1777. Okay, in the basic nearby region of Chandanagar. Chandanagar was a French factory. Over there only they started indigo, producing indigo, farming indigo. The whole process is pretty tiring. If you'll see, this is the way it is done. So basically, first it has to be cut out, then they have to keep it in water, cleaned up, and then the whole process, and finally product you get it like this. Okay, the process was very tiring. The people who were involved, the native Indians, who used to have stay half submerged in water every day for 12 hours. So just imagine what must be going on with the people's body who were forced to these kind of work. But that is how natural indigo was produced. Okay, but still in the last quarter of the 18th century and first quarter of the 19th century, the indigo farming was profitable. Okay, and till it was profitable, it was accepted even by the Indian native farmers. The problem arose around 1827, 1828, 1830. The problem was that the cost of indigo in the international markets reduced, as well as the production in the Indian market also dimmed down. And why it happened? First, let me tell you that. So, reason for sudden increase or cause of indigo rebellion were, first of all, the worldwide inflation due to the discovery of gold mines in California that started in 1848. Okay, so basically what happened, 2-3 international things happened which impacted the indigo trade in India. And how it happened, let me tell you this. Back in 1840s, world got to know that California has a lot of gold mines. So a lot of people from Britain went to western continental United States, and they started in the whole rush of gold mines. All the banks who earlier used to easily give loan to the plantation owner were now providing funds for this gold mine thing. So the rate at which the plantation owners used to get loan to start the plantation in India was increased. So the margin of the plantation owner reduced. Okay. Now, first thing that happened. Then secondly, by 1847, you see Agency House and Union Bank of Calcutta. These were the two main banks who were providing loans to the British or European plantation owner to run the indigo plantation. These banks failed. Okay, when these banks failed, again it became difficult for the plantation owner to raise capital to run their business. Two things. Now the third thing, you see in Bengal there was very high, Bengal is a very densely populated region, so it was easy and cheap for the plantation owner to get people to work in the plantation. But you will see that it was only in 1850s that new railway lines were established, and with the establishment of new railway lines, it was now possible for these people who were forced to work in the plantation, indigo plantation, to now just take the train and go from hinterland Assam, hinterland of Bengal to Calcutta or Chittagong. Okay, going to Calcutta and Chittagong, obviously you will get a more profitable job. Anything is better than standing half naked in water for 12 days every day. Okay, kuch bhi acha hai. So you have to keep this thing in mind, that what happened, that the people who were earlier easily available to work in the plantations, indigo plantation, were now going to Calcutta and Chittagong using these trains. So first, the rate at which they were able to raise loan from international market was increased. The banks which were giving them loan easily in Calcutta have already shut down. And thirdly, the rate of labor also increased. So effectively what will happen? The profit margin of the plantation owners reduced. Okay, when the profit margin of the plantation owner reduced, okay, what they started doing? They started demanding the local farmers to grow more indigo. So if there will be more indigo, that reduced profit margin can also provide them more indigo production. So they demanded the locals to produce more indigo, which the locals didn't want it to do. Okay, the locals were forced to pay high taxation also, because if the the money is not coming from plantation, the Bengal government has to get money from somewhere. So they started raising the taxation in the region. So high burden of taxation because of this increased in the region. The peasants, the people who were working on these plantations were forced, exploited up to the extent to produce more indigo. Okay, and this also pushed them towards rebellion. So these were the major reasons for rebellion. Now, how rebellion happened? Now, under these circumstances, rebellion first started in the districts of Burdwan, Bankura, Birbhum, Northern 24 Pargana or 24 Pargana, and Jessore. Now, Jessore and all is in right now Bangladesh. Okay, so in this region, initially, the people who were working in the plantation start and they rebelled. Initially, they killed few of the plantation owners, and initially, the revolt was violent. It was violent. Okay. But very soon you will see, and this is why this whole rebellion is important and is discussed again and again, and that the reason for success of Indigo rebellion, unlike the rebellions which happened, because this was also happening because of economic reason. Okay, in the past the rebellion started in the economic reasons were never successful. This was successful. Why? Because at this moment, when it was in the initial stage and it was getting violent, the Bengali intelligentsia, the same Bengali people who have somewhat get interacted, the Bengali middle class who got a bit rich, who were established in Calcutta, who were part of the whole structure evolved by East India Company. Okay, they by this time, they knew English, they understood the English judicial system, and they started supporting. They had some sympathy for the native people, native plantation workers, and they started supporting their cause. So movement turned non-violent and they started using English judicial system, which was not happened before this. Okay, movement received support from Bengali intelligentsia and movement turned non-violent and started using English judicial system. Okay, the revolt started initially in the village of Govindpur, Chaugacha in Krishnanagar, Nadia district, where Vishnu Ran Bishwas and Digambar Bishwas, okay, led the revolt. In the initial stage, the revolt was violent and many planters were hanged and indigo depots were burned down. But then, the specific instances, the people, few of the names if you can remember, this will be good. Few of the people who played the role of turning the violent protest into non-violent agitation and using the judicial model. First one was, the most important person was Nawab Abdul Latif. Now, Nawab Abdul Latif was a government employee. He was a deputy magistrate in the Jessore district. And it is said that he gave, while working as a judicial officer, he gave a lot of judgments in favor of the plantation workers. And he wrote in his writings and his judgments that the plantation owners have been exploiting the native people, and it is but natural that people will retaliate. Okay, so his judgments are very interesting, very important, and they were the first. Then Deen Bandhu Mitra, okay, later in 1860, Deen Bandhu Mitra wrote a famous novel called as Neel Darpan. which was basically based on the difficulties with these indigo farmers had to face, the plight of the indigo farmers. Then there is a character called as Sisir Kumar Ghosh. Sisir Kumar Ghosh later on became a very famous leader, even in the times of 1905 Swadeshi and boycott movement. But in these times, he was a very young journalist, and he was working in the local correspondent in the newspaper Hindu Patriot, where exactly the same district, Jasor, where Abdul Latif was working. And Sisir Kumar Ghosh in this newspaper Hindu Patriot reported about the exploitation which was happening on the indigo plantation workers. Okay, now British Indian government appointed Indigo Commission in 1860. After this, because these cases were getting up, and now these were reported in newspaper also. So because of this, because of the public shaming, British Indian government, and after this a revolt has already taken place of 1857. The government wanted to make sure that they should at least look like a neutral body. So under these circumstances, the British Indian government appointed a committee, Indigo Commission, to look into the issue of these people. Okay, the commissions accepted the planters were at the fault. It was a whole session, it went on, or more than 112 plantation laborers made their speeches. Okay, they were heard, and finally the commission found out that what the plantation owners have done is wrong. They accepted the planters were at fault and restrained them from using violent means. Although one need to understand that even though they accepted that what plantation owners were doing was wrong, they never took very strict action against the plantation owner. It was not that they were told, they were punished, or they were jailed, or they were told even to pay fines. All it was done was they were told not to do it again. Okay, so you can understand what is happening. But after this, you will see that Rent Act 10th in Bengal legislation was passed in 1859. It provided safety to the peasants, okay, for 12 years. It was decided that if any peasants is working for more than 12 years on a piece of land, the zamindars cannot remove them. That was also passed in the same phase. And then it was also assured that the plantation owners, indigo plantation owners, will not exploit the people who were working for them, who were producing indigo. Although down the line, you will see in 1860s and 1870s, in Germany, there was a new invention because of which synthetic indigo came into being. Now, synthetic indigo was easy to produce and cheaper, and therefore European market was taken over by synthetic indigo, and indigo plantation owners who were growing indigo in India, they stopped producing indigo in India. Okay, instead they started pushing Indians to produce opium after this, but that's a different story. But here, always remember that even though the Indian peasantry who were forced to produce indigo, they got some relief, but not any satisfactory action was taken, and ultimately they ended up the issue got resolved on its own because of some trade issues, or because of some international market actions only. Okay, it was not that because of British government's action the plantation has been stopped. No, nothing like that happened. The plantation stopped because the demand for the natural indigo from India ended. Okay, just keep this thing in mind. Now let's move forward. Again, this question has been asked in 2020, 2 years back. Indigo cultivation in India declined by the beginning of 20th century because, first, peasants' resistance to oppressive conduct of the planters. No, this is not the correct answer. Peasants resisted, action was taken, but that action was not affirmative. Okay, it became unprofitable in the world market because of the new inventors. This is the correct point. National leaders' opposition to the cultivation of indigo. That happened, but no, that is not the reason. Government control over the planters. That never happened. Okay, the second is the option that even though that indigo revolt, in the aftermath of indigo revolt, some relief was given to the people, but those relief was not enough, and the end of indigo plantation happened only because of the international market reasons, and it has nothing to do with either the British Indian government or the recommendations of the Indigo Commission of 1860. Okay, so keep that thing in mind, and these are the kind of questions which will be asked in the exam. So now let's move to Pabna Agrarian Rebellion. While this peasant rebellion, Indigo Rebellion was going on, similarly at that time, zamindars aimed to deny tenancy right to the peasants under the Rent Act of 1859. So I told you, while this thing was going, British government saw that one of the major reason was every other day or every other year the peasants are just removed from the land, because in the permanent settlement British government has given the proprietary ownership to the zamindars, not the real rayyat on the ground, not the real farmer on the ground. So every other year, every doing, misdoing, whatever may be the reason, every other day these farmers are being bedakhal. Okay, they have been removed from the farming land, and many a time they gather together and they rebel against the zamindar. When the East India Company comes to resolve the issue, it becomes a fight between the farmers and the East India Company, and then violence takes place. So because to resolve these issues in 1859, while Indigo Revolt was going on only, they decided to pass this act. This is called as Rent Act 10 of Bengal Regulatory Action Report, which was passed in 1859, which stated that any tenant peasant, what are tenant peasants? Peasantry farmers who don't have a land of their own and they are farming on someone else's land. So it was decided that if someone is farming on a piece of land for or more than 12 years, they would have rights against arbitrary removal. Okay, अगर कोई 12 साल या उससे ज्यादा तक एक ही जमीन पे काम कर रहा है तो आप उसको ऐसे रैंडमली फेंक नहीं सकते उठा के. You just cannot kick someone out if they are working on a piece of same land for 12 or more years. Cool. Indian zamindars have a better solution. On every 11th year, they started removing the people. They knew that after the 12th year, these people will have rights. We don't have to give them rights. You need to understand, even it was not that all the native people are one side and they were fighting the Britishers. The native people also have their selfish interests. So the zamindars, what they used to do, okay, the Britishers are making a law 12 years. On every 11th year, we will remove all the peasants and we will bring in new farmers. Now 12 years nahi hue, so you can't claim the right on that piece of land. So because of this, in Pabna, a rebellion took place. Agrarian leagues were formed here. Okay, and since by this time they started taking help from Bengal intelligentsia, so no tax campaign was started. And the case went into the court, judicial court, because the zamindar told the East India Company that they are not paying us. How can we pay you? So the whole case went to the judicial level, and the judiciary understood the problem and they told the government to take action. Government reinforced the Rent Act of 1859 by declaring, government thought that some changes has to be made. So government thought that, okay, let's do one thing. Instead of making the rule for individual rayyat, let's make the rule for the mahal, that is the village. So instead of saying that, they made an amendment in the Rent Act 10 of 1859. They said that in the Rent Act 10 of 1859, it is stated that any farmer who is working on a piece of land for 12 or more years cannot be removed without giving any reasons. They cannot be removed arbitrarily. Now, the rule was changed. It was said that any village which people of that village are working usually on the same piece of land, so they cannot be removed single-handedly. So now, if someone has to be removed before 12 years, that won't be a single person, it will have to be a whole village. And when you will try to remove the whole village, it won't be like a small thing. Okay, it won't be something you will be able to curb. Okay, so the British government, the government on the top, the district magistrate, everyone will get to know if the zamindar will try to remove the whole village on the 11th year, and that will be stopped. Because the biggest problem was, at every 11th year, if he is removing 1 or 2 farmers, action was not able to be taken, because most of the time district magistrates or superintendent of police won't even get to know that someone has been removed, because removing means killing them. should know this. Okay, so this is something you need to understand, that specifically land was changed from individual rayats to the mahal, okay, the village rather than a specific land. Right. So this was Pabna rebellion. Now let's come to the Deccan agrarian riots, and this is something very interesting. You will find it very interesting what happened in this. Okay, this is very interesting. So what happened in Deccan agrarian riots in 1876? So for understanding this, we also need to go through America. Let's first go to America. So what happened is, you need to know a bit of world history for this, and if you don't worry, I'll give you enough information so that काम चल जाए. So American Civil War happened in between 1861 and 1865. This is the time when Abraham Lincoln became the president of America. And okay, so you know this is usually the map of America. Okay, this is नीचे Mexico है, but this is the map of America. Fine, this is the present day map of America, something on these lines. So not exactly, but something on these lines. These are northern states and these are southern states. Southern states, these lines were not this perfect, this was something like this, but let us say it this way. Okay, now what happened? This is over here is Britain, London. Okay, so if you'll see in this map, the southern states used to have legal slavery. Slavery was legal. Okay, and usually the African Americans used to be the slave in 99.999%. In the northern region, slavery was illegal. Okay, Abraham Lincoln said in his election manifesto that he will make slavery illegal throughout America, and therefore when he was elected as the president of United States, okay, the southern states came together and they called themselves to be the American Confederation. Instead of United States of America, they made a new country called as American Confederation. American Confederation. Now when this happened, the American North declared a war on American South. Okay, the southern states were under war because northern states declared a war on them. Now the Union and the northern states were called as the Union Army. So the Union Army, the southern states were very big on the cotton production because they had so much slaves, so much farmland, so they were basically high on cotton production. States like South Carolina, North Carolina, these states were high on Alabama, Georgia, these were doing huge amount of cotton production. And all this cotton was sold to the British factories, cotton. Okay, and this cotton used to provide economy help because all the money they used to get. So Abraham Lincoln thought, you will think why I'm teaching you world history right now, but you need to understand this thing. Abraham Lincoln thought that if we can stop the incoming trade, the money which is coming from Britain to the southern states, okay, they will be out of money very soon and we will easily win the war. So in 1861, he created this barrier using his naval power. Okay, so the Union Navy, okay, controlled the whole of Atlantic Ocean, and Britain was told not to interfere in the personal affairs of United States of America. Fine, no issues to resolve your issue. Fine. So this area was closed off. Southern states were not allowed to send cotton anymore, and so their source of revenue dried down and they lost to northern states by 1865. Fine. This is the story of America, what happened in America. Now let's focus on this small dibba. So let's make another diagram. This is your London, and over here is your India. Fine, something like this. This region is called as Deccan, and this region is the one where all the cotton usually is produced. Okay. After 1818, this region landed up in hands of Britishers after Third Anglo-Maratha War. Cotton was produced in this region. All this cotton used to go to where? All this cotton used to go to London again. All the factories in Lancashire, Manchester, they were using this cotton. So, factories in London had two sources of cotton, from Mexico and southern states of America, southern states of United States of America and Mexico, and secondly from Deccan in India. Now, all the cotton which was coming from Mexico and southern states of United States of America stopped because of the action taken by the Union Navy of United States of America because of the war. Under these circumstances, the demand of Indian cotton, okay, the demand for Indian cotton, okay, Indian cotton boomed, increased. Fine. So around 1863-1864, Indian cotton prices started increasing, and it increased up to extent of 4x. मतलब जितने cotton का, for the same amount of cotton, if you were getting 1 rupee, now you will get 4 rupees. So a lot of farmers in India, in Deccan region, started raising money from the market, usually from the Sahukars. Okay, Sahukars, local bankers, okay, irregular bankers, and they used to take money and started putting into cotton plantation, and cotton is a cash crop. Okay, cotton plantation. Fine. This system worked very well till 1871. Fine. By this time, by 1870, already in 1865, the war ended in United States of America. By 1870-71, the route was again re-established. The whole trade between southern states, Mexico, their production also increased in next 5 years after the war ended. And by 1870, they were again sending the same amount of cotton. Because of this, now by 1871, the demand of cotton now, Indian demand cotton decreased. So the prices again went from 4x to 1x. But the Indian farmers have already raised money from the Indian bankers, Indian Sahukars at a higher price. So if the price will now go low, they will not be able to pay back. Okay, this was happening in 1871. And this went on to cascade and cascade and cascade, one above other in 1872, 1873, 1874. And Indian farmers were facing the brunt of this change in international price dynamics. After this, in 1874 onwards, the monsoon situation, Deccan started facing drought. Deccan faced drought सूखा पड़ गया, drought after 1874. Okay, drought, Britishers didn't took any steps. 1875 situation became even worse. 1876 there was a famine. Now when the famine situation arose, okay, लोगों के पास खाना ही नहीं है, people didn't had food in 1876 in Deccan, in many of the region, and they were expected to pay back the loan they have taken. So there was no other way out. What they did, people planned, people always have plans for such. They planned that if we just go to the houses of the Sahukars and we steal all the papers in which it is mentioned that who has taken how much loan, and we will burn the papers, problem will be resolved. But the story doesn't goes like this. Whenever you are going to go inside a house of the Sahukar, okay, someone will slap the Sahukar also. Someone try to steal the papers, Sahukar will also kill someone. Someone will get murdered. Someone will fell from the house. Something will happen. People started getting killed. Mostly the Sahukar. Sahukars started getting killed. The British government got involved. Okay. These riots between the Sahukars and the peasantry are famously called as Deccan agricultural riots, which happened in 1876. Okay. British government, again, after this, British government took its steps, and some intelligence, just like in the case of Neil Withrow, Indigo Rebellion, Indigo Rebellion, the Bhadra Lok, the intelligentsia from Calcutta supported the people. Similarly, this time the intelligentsia from Pune, because in Deccan, Pune was the center of native intelligentsia, they came forward and they supported people in their cause, and they raised the question in the judicial system. They, just like the judicial system was used in Bengal in 1859-1860, 1876 onwards, the judicial system was now used in Bombay and Pune for the people in Deccan. Okay, and now a new committee will be formed by British government, and therefore a act was passed finally in 1879 called as Deccan Agricultural Relief Act 1879. Okay, and most of the loan of the people was rid of, okay, was removed from the listing. Okay, it is usually called as Dara. This is considered a step, just like the violent economic movement to non-violent economic movement thing transformed on the Bengal side in 1859-1860. Similarly, in Deccan it happened in 1876 and to 1879. This is what you need to know in Deccan agricultural rights. British view British views on dealing with the riots, drought, were basically government should intervene to prevent the life and livelihood, and the other was Malthusian theory. So yeah, this one more thing I missed it. Some students ask me this question that, sir, why the Britishers were not doing anything in 1875, 1876, or why the government was not telling people that don't take loan, the market will change over there, because it never happens. Have anyone told you, like even in 2022 people are still telling their kids engineering kar lo, scope hai, or MBBS kar lo, scope hai? Has anyone told you that after 2007 or 8 if you have got into engineering college, scope nahi hai? These things takes time. Okay, so all the people who have done their engineering are basically peasants from Deccan who have been told by their fathers, अरे cotton में पैसा लगाओ, scope है. Okay, वो scope था 10 साल पहले, अब नहीं है. Okay, so first of all, government obviously वो colonial government है, अभी की government नहीं करती, colonial government क्या करेगी? So nothing happened on that front. When it came to handling the drought situation, the British had very simple two issues, and this is also you need to know about Bengal drought. Britishers, the one system was, obviously there is a drought situation, you have to take, as an administration, as the government, you have to take action for supporting people. But Britishers always thought that this is not our duty, this is not our job, we are not responsible, we can't do anything. On the other side, you also need to understand the Malthusian principle thing. That is, Britishers said, as per the Malthusian principle, what Malthus stated, that whatever is happening is in the realm of the natural happenings. And since Mother Earth has the capability of resolving the issues which has developed. So if the people are dying, Mother Earth is doing it and no one else should get involved. The problem is, when the similar thing used to happen in Britain, then they were working, then they were helping the people. But when it was happening in India, Mother Earth was held responsible. So this just tells you this is all part of a bigger racist system. That colonial state mein native Indians are not that important. Let them die. Okay. 1879, Lord Lytton was the viceroy. This is the only good act of Lord Lytton ever done. Okay, otherwise Lord Lytton was a very exploitative, brutal Governor General. He passed Deccan Agricultural Relief Act DARA to provide relief to the peasantry in aftermath of Deccan riots, 1875 to 1876. Okay, fine. For those who didn't get the American map thing, you can see this map. Actually, the curtailment which was done for the southern states was called as Scott's Great Snake. Okay, the cotton supply blockade and the reopening impacted the cotton prices in India. Okay, so you can refer to this map of the America. Okay. Now, characteristics of the peasant rebellion, that is also important. So they weren't anti-colonial in nature. First of all, no strong sense of nationalism. They were of limited nature and all they were asking was economic reform or economic relief, and that's it. They were not asking for ki dominion status de do, hame chhod ke chale jao, we'll be ruling ourselves, that will be better. These kind of things were not talked about. So you have to keep that thing in. Support by the educated middle class was seen both in Bengal and Deccan, and I have given you a specific example in both the cases. Okay. They opted for constitutional legal means, and that was interesting after 1857. And these things never used to happen, constitutional means and all, before 1857. Okay, again, the same thing. Just like tribal revolts, when you will be referring to your Spectrum or any other book, there will be civil rebellions. Okay, these civil rebellions include not only peasant rebellion, but also sometimes rebellions by erstwhile officials. For example, Gadgaris were working for the Maratha Empire in Nagpur. When Nagpur was taken over by the Britishers in 1808, after that Gadgaris situation, the Gadgaris who were erstwhile working for, now they don't have jobs, so they rebelled. Similar kind of rebellion also happened after 1848 or 1818 in Satara, somewhere around 1820 and 1823. So these kind of revolt used to happen. So wherever you will see that any of the local ruler was removed, after his removal there was civilian rebellion also. In most of the cases, the rebellions could be considered in the same format as if you are changing something. Okay, for example, take a case of Kashmir. 2019 government of India changed the rules and regulations over there. So there are people who don't like it. There are people in Kashmir who don't like it, and even now there are threats that if the Indian armed forces remove back completely, there might be some action from some militant groups. Okay, these kind of things used to happen all the time whenever the Britishers took over from any of the local regional ruler, whether it was Marathas or whether it was in Awadh or whether it was in Gujarat, whether it was in Gwalior, all the places there were certain rebellions immediately afterwards. And those rebellions and peasant revolts are mentioned here. Okay, so they are divided in the sense between 1857 and 1757 and 1857. For example, you see that in the northern plain, we'll start from here, Bengal. So immediately after Battle of Buxar, the situation became grim economically. Okay, and sannyasi rebellion started. These were the same sannyasi people who supported the Naga sadhus and those people who participated from the side of Nawab of Bengal and Nawab of Awadh in Battle of Buxar, now rebelled, and whole phase of militancy started 1764 onward, which only ended in 1820. Okay, then revolt on Midnapur and Dhalwam, that happened also immediately in 1766. So Britishers came to power in 1765. They started asking for money more from Midnapur and Dhalwam region. The local zamindar rebelled. So that is him. So even in cases of you don't know but if you have the basic idea of the bigger story, you can assume what must have happened. Okay. Revolt of Mormia, again 1769. This was the drought phase when it started. Ramosi uprising 1822. This is happening 1825-26. This is happening in and around Satara region. Okay, so in the aftermath of end of Maratha Empire, when Chhatrapati was reduced to the office of Raja of Satara, immediately after this, you see a rebellion in the Maratha region. Ganjam rebellion in 1835. This is in Odisha when the local ruler was removed. Paika rebellion. Paikas were again in the Odisha region. They were in the erstwhile Ganjam rulers, at the time of Ganjam rulers of Odisha. Paikas were the policing tribe. They were the people who were given the work for policing. Now, when the Britishers took over, Britishers have their own policing system. So they didn't needed the support of the Paikas. So Paikas were out of work and they rebelled. Okay, so that happened. Ahom, Assam region. Ahom region, okay. Ahoms actually took Ahom in the first Anglo-Burmese war. Ahoms actually, that was not Anglo-Burmese war. It was war between the Burmese and the Ahom. And the Ahom asked for help from the Britishers. Britishers went in, but never came out. So once Treaty of Yandabo was signed in 1826, Ahom thought that Britishers will go back, but Britishers never went back from Burma and even took some of the region of Ahoms also. And that's why in 1828, the Ahom rebelled, but nothing came out of it. Britishers handled it. Okay. And I expect you that later on, I'm just giving you some idea. These rebellions are not there in your NCERT. These rebellions are not there in your NCERT. Since I'm doing it, I'm just doing some extra effort to make sure that you know these things. Okay. In the northern plains, you will see there was a civil uprising in Gorakhpur, Basti and Bahraich region in 1781. So what really happened in 1781 in Gorakhpur, Bahraich and Basti? Warren Hastings thought that the Indian zamindars who were given the ijaradari, who were basically in 1781 told to collect revenue under jaradari system, were not giving him exact figure. They are using corrupt means, and therefore he appointed one of the British officer only for an experiment basis as the zamindar of this region, Gorakhpur, Basti and Bahraich. Okay. And he was expected to collect a revenue of 22 lakh rupees in 1 year from this region. That is what Warren Hastings assumed. Hastings thought that if this experiment proves good, then I will appoint British officials only as zamindar instead of appointing natives. But this is something which Indians also understood. The native zamindars understood that if Britishers will be appointed as zamindars, then we will do what? So at this time, the local zamindars of Gorakhpur, Basti and Bahraich came together and they rebelled and killed the officer who was appointed as killed the younger brother of the officer, and then he was removed, and then the whole plan was defunct. Similarly, uprising in Bareilly, the Britishers basically asked the locals in Bareilly in 1816 to pay another kind of tax for the policing of the city. Okay, so people rebelled. एक पैसा थोड़ी देंगे हम इसके लिए. So people rebelled. Okay. Northwest Wahhabi movement. This is basically from where the Taliban movement also started. Okay, so these people kept on rebelling 1820s onwards, and the Kuka movement is something which started 1840. Basically, Kuka movement is not something which started because of the Britishers. Kuka movement started. I have told you about Punjab, and I have told you that Ranjit Singh passed away in 1839, and I have told you over there that Ranjit Singh's son, elder son, Khadak Singh, was a drunkard. When Khadak Singh came to power in 1839, he was drunk for so much time that many people in the Sikh court disliked it. Some among them, who were a Puritan Sikh, they decided that a new movement has to be started to purify the whole Sikh empire, and so a Sikh empire, in the Sikh empire, a Kuka movement was started. So this Kuka movement was actually a Puritan movement which was started in 1840 with the intention of purify the Sikh the Sikh community, to promote vegetarianism, make sure that people don't drink and smoke or intoxicants. So these kind of things. So it went on till 1845, but when the Britishers attacked, the Kukas joined the rest of the Sikh to fight the Britishers. And after 1849, now the Kuka movement started acting against the Britishers only. So initially it was a Puritan movement, and 1849 onward it's changed against towards the anti-British movement. It existed till 1870, and in 1870s their leader was arrested. And you can, I can tell you this, you will read about this later also Kuka, about Kuka movement, but just take this as an extra knowledge, that the whole idea of using khadi, using charkha, and okay, and all those things to Gandhiji came in from the people who were working for Kuka movement. Gandhiji went to Punjab in 1918, okay, during Rowlatt Satyagraha. Then also only he got to know in detail about the Kuka movement and their economic ideas, and from there the whole idea of khadi and charkha came to Gandhiji. Okay. Now, Deccan Gadgari uprising, I explained you. Sawantwadi revolt also happened in that region only. Veluthampi revolt happened in Kerala. Revolt of Kittur Chennamma. Kittur Chennamma is very important. It happened in Karnataka. Kittur Chennamma was a local female ruler, and her statue has been inaugurated few years back in Parliament. So that's why she is again and again mentioned. Okay. Satara uprising also happened in Maratha region. Surat salt agitation happened in 1840. This was when the very first time the Britishers imposed a salt tax on the Surat region. Okay, so in the South India, again similar revolts. You will see that after 1792, the Travancore royal family signed a treaty which was not subsidiary alliance but very much similar to subsidiary alliance with the British East India Company. And after that, when British East India Company started increasing their influence in the region, the locals rebelled. Revolt of Raja of Vizianagaram happened in 1794 after this. Polygar revolts 1795 to 1805. The Polygars were active in this region only. Kerala and nearby, what we call now. Resistance of Kerala Varma Raja, that also happened in this region, this time only. And revolt of Dhundia Bagh in Bedanur in 1799 and 1800. Okay, this was in the Karnataka region. This is immediately after the fall of Tipu Sultan. Okay, this was immediately after. And the revolt of Dhundia Bagh is very interesting because Dhundia Bagh was someone who was arrested by Tipu Sultan. So when Tipu Sultan was killed, Dhundia Bagh was in jail in Mysore. So Britishers got him out, and they thought that we have just got him out, so he will support us. But he came out of jail, told Britishers, thanks, okay, fine, I'm going, I'll call you back or something like this. And then he went out, and then he declared himself to be the sovereign and created a territory of his own. And Britishers were, the guy who was at ground officer was Arthur Wellesley. Okay, Arthur Wellesley later on played a very important role while fighting Napoleon in 1814, 1850. And later on, he also became the Prime Minister of Britain. But over here, Arthur Wellesley was amazed that, dude, I got you out of jail and now you are fighting me only. But he was arrested and then killed. Okay, so that's just for the story fun thing. So you have to do this on your time. These are not there in your NCERTs, but anyway, it's there. Okay, Bundelkhand region insurgency. Again, this insurgency also happened. You can see immediately after 1805, the second Anglo-Maratha war ended. The one after another, the Kiledas were forced to give away the control to the Britishers in the central India region. And then this Bundelkhand insurgency started. And Bundela rebellion of 1842 was a totally different reason. Okay, this was later on when the Britishers tried to take over the small princely state. Okay, yeah. So this is done. Let's discuss the questions which you need to know after doing this course. These are from the NCERT book only, the new NCERT book. These are from the new NCERT book, not the old NCERT. Okay. So why was the Jotedar a powerful figure in many areas of rural Bengal? I've explained the comparison between how the Jotedar's powers increased because they were always who were present in the villages. Jamidars were, although they had far more area in their control, but they were usually the absentee landlords. Okay, so those things can be mentioned in this question. How did zamindars manage to retain control over the zamindaris? There were very many different tricks and twists they did, whether using benami property or using lathat. All those things were done by, or transferring their property in the name of the female members of their own family. Those all things need to be mentioned here. How did the Pahadiyas respond to the coming of the outsiders? They started killing the Dakus. And always remember, Pahadiyas considered even the Santhals as outsiders. Okay, so we have discussed this. Why did the Santhals rebel against the British rule? Because Britishers has initially assured them that Pahadiyas will not revolt against them, and the Pahadiyas are always continuously irritated or negged the Santhals, and then the British revenue demand was also getting increased. The major reason was British revenue demand, which increased beyond a point in 1830s when they rebelled initially. What explains the anger of Deccan riots against the moneylenders? You have to explain the whole situation here. What explained the anger? The anger was twofold. First of all, the British government was increasing the revenue demand even though the Deccan region was going through a drought situation, and secondly, the money lenders were asking for money back even after knowing that the demand or the prices of cotton in the international market has reduced. Okay, so that has to be mentioned. Why were many zamindars auctioned after the permanent settlement? Because the demand, the money revenue which was collected was divided into a ratio of 10:1, and effectively zamindars were not able to collect the amount of revenue which was which they were expected to collect. And then there's, it's not mentioned in your NCERT, but there used to be a sunset clause, and as per sunset clause, it was stated that on the defined day, if the zamindar was not submitting the revenue by the evening, by the sunset, his property was taken over. In what way was the livelihood of the Pahadiyas different from that of Santhals? I explained in detail that how Pahadiyas under no circumstances ever were involved in farming, and Santhals were okay with farming 1800 onwards. How did the American Civil War affect the lives of the riots? R-Y-O-T. Please don't write riots. Riots in India. Okay. So I explained this thing during the Deccan agrarian crisis. Okay. How the prices of cotton went up and down because of the American Civil War. And since there was nobody who can keep Indian traders or Indian farmers informed, okay, they just solely over dependent on the international prices and had to get into a debt situation. What are the problems of using official source in writing the history of peasants? It only provides, this is not taught yet, this problem is that it only provides the British government's perspective. I told you that about that report. Okay, I told you about that report which was published by British government in 1813, the report 5. British government reports British government perspective, and therefore we don't really know that what were the real problems which the zamindars were facing, because these kind of problems were not faced by zamindars in the prior times like Mughal times or before that, whenever there was stability. So don't see the time of 1750s and 1760s, those were pretty unstable times. But in the earlier times, even in the times of Shah Jahan, in those times, the problems were not there. So the problem is because the British government perspective is only provided by the official report. Okay, so try these questions on your own. You'll have the PDF of the chapter, go through it, and then we'll proceed from here in the next chapter. In the next session, we will be talking about the British government structure and government policies and socio-cultural regulation. That will be done in the next session. That will be all for now. Thanks a lot and have a nice day. Thank you.